Good morning, everyone. So, in 1997, California began its version of the medical marijuana program centered around the co-op model, also known as the cooperative compassion model. A medical license holder could grow medical cannabis for the members of co-op. Today, this compassion model has evolved into a billion-dollar industry with state regulations and compliance measures. The industry stocks are traded globally while federal legislation is changing to include billion-dollar pharmaceutical giants that are losing market share to a medicine that the people are demanding. This brings us to the conversation today. How is higher education adapting to demand for cannabis? Will institutions of higher learning embrace a federally illegal industry and provide students of the 21st century the necessary skill sets to participate in an industry that is only growing, or will they be left out? Our panelists today will shed some light on this topic. But first, we have to acknowledge our sponsors for this event. Root and Good is the sponsor of this virtual event. We would like to thank the program for empowering women grow to educate the community and bring awareness to the industry. Thank you. Our first panelist will educate us on the state regulatory educational requirements. To give perspective, many states are requiring education certificates for employees of dispensaries, manufacturing and civilized and cultivation facilities. Sorry. The expert in this particular area is Jamila Hogan. She educates employees with the know-how and practical sense of a skill set and regulatory compliance through her business, the Green Life Learning Center. Our next panelist, Vanessa Williams, is the Assistant Dean of New Programs at Rutgers University Department of Law. She will provide us with a twofold perspective of the evolution of the legacies and viability of cannabis industry as it becomes a major intersection with formal education. Dr. Shonda Macias will give us insight on working with HBCUs that are connecting to the cannabis industry through her partnering with Southern University. Alrighty. So we are going to start with Jamila. And in your work with the Green Life Learning Center, you have dealt with many licenses, social equity, and traditional. Recently, many states have recently enacted social equity programs as an attempt to right some of the wrongs done to Black and Brown people during the war on drugs. Do you think they are working? If so, why? If not, why not? And what can be done to improve them?
I think that there is a great start. I think that it's a conversation that's being had in every demographic. Even looking at Colorado, which at first felt like maybe its minority population wasn't such so that social equity needed to be at the forefront. But now, with everyone across the nation and even the world in some cases, that's what they're dealing with. But when you look at, for instance, DC and Maryland, the fact that we haven't come to a consensus on who is social equity for and clearly define who's been hurt and understanding that it's more than people who have been arrested. It was a war on drugs that affected entire communities, and looking at programs and different things that address the community as a whole and not specific individuals is what we can strive to look for. I really like how Maryland put it with the public schools as a product of both DC and Maryland public schools in the 80s and the 90s. The impact that the war on drugs, the jump outs, different things, getting pulled over, getting harassed by the police, makes it so that it is a community thing versus DC is specific for those who have been incarcerated or who are the child or spouse of someone who's been incarcerated. So just looking from market to market, I think that we should look at having a consensus of what is social equity, who is social equity.
Alrighty. And the next question I have is, how does state regulated education prepare business owners and employees for success in the cannabis industry? And is this enough to ensure the success of social equity operators? Do the social equity applicants have same tools available as their non-social equity counterparts?
Um, there are a lot of really great programs that are coming out that are specifically addressing the nuances of the cannabis industry, the specifics of its supply chain, the way that you have to look at running a business that has to constantly be updated with new legislations and regulations. So it's exciting to see a lot of programs across the nation start to be developed for that. I do think that perhaps there could be, with these social equity programs, a specific curriculum that can help people who didn't go to school for business or can't afford college, so that they also get some of the very important information that you need just to run a successful business, whether it's cannabis or not, and then also to know about the different regulations of manufacturing standards and processing standards, cultivation standards, uh, knowledge of the plant itself and bud tending standards and things of that nature as well.
Okay. How has it been for you as a woman of color operating a business in the cannabis space? And how have you had to adapt and evolve your business in response to ongoing research, changing legislation, and emerging consumption methods to ensure it stays accurate, up to date, and relevant to the public?
It's been very difficult and very interesting, especially as we look at the unavoidable truth of the unequal application of the law. um, as we are participating in something that is federally legal, but from state to state and place to place, how people are allowed to operate before licensure is available, and the choice to enforce said licensure. As a Black woman, as a mother, it has been very difficult to come out with plant touching businesses for fear of prosecution and losing my child. Um, so certainly as a woman, it has been a brave decision to work in this industry while it's still federally illegal. But it also, shout outs to Women Grow and many other organizations that have formed because of this pressure that exists as long as it's federally illegal, but having a resource of people, of other business persons who you can share these toils and tribulations with, who can help advise you. It's smarter when you're able to work together. A collection of stars is a constellation. And I'm thankful for the constellation that surrounds me, that inspires me, that advises me, protects me. And I'm happy to teach and learn from them. I think that's the key to success. Find you a tribe.
Okay, that's beautiful. Okay, so next we have Vanessa next. Thank you, Jamila.
Thank you. This was awesome. Great questions.
Alrighty, so Vanessa, welcome. And the questions I have for you today. So, colleges and universities have not always been a traditional path into the cannabis industry. How has higher education embraced cannabis as a career from both a student and faculty perspective? And what sorts of opportunities can a degree in cannabis prepare for you?
Thank you. First of all, thanks so much for having me here today. It's such a pleasure to be alongside these amazing other speakers. So big thanks to Women Grow. Just for a bit of context, I work at Rutgers Law School, where I run our certificate in cannabis law and business, which is a program that started in January this year. It's a 6-month certificate program that takes entrepreneurs, aspiring current entrepreneurs, and people who want to be involved with other aspects of the cannabis industry through all of the kind of legal ins and outs that they need to know about to run their business. But translating that legalese into understandable words, right? So it's been really interesting becoming involved with cannabis education, particularly in the state of New Jersey. We're the state institution here. And we were late to the game. There were already other institutions doing amazing work in cannabis education. Stockton University has a minor in cannabis studies. Rowan University has undergraduate and graduate certificates, and they've just added a concentration to their MBA program for cannabis professionals. There are community colleges, there are independent programs. More broadly, we are seeing higher education institutions across the US starting to build partnerships with companies like Greenflower to deliver curricula as well. So it's an exciting moment. Higher education is not traditionally fast moving. It is very slow. And so it is exciting to see these programs start to develop and come on board. So I think from a student perspective, there are lots of programs out there that will support people in various aspects of their career, whether they're starting businesses as retailers or cultivators, whether they are interested in the industry from a ancillary perspective. There are bud tender training programs, for folks that don't necessarily want to start their own business, but want to be involved in other ways. And I think student and faculty support is strong. I think the biggest challenge to all of this is working in an institution that receives federal funding, because the lawyers for our institution were very nervous about starting this program because they didn't want to jeopardize federal funding. And so at Rutgers, I don't think we'll see a sort of credit-bearing course anytime soon, an undergraduate minor or anything like that. But I was then tasked with figuring out how to work around the edges and how to get a program up and running, which is what led us to our non-credit certificate program.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the next question I have is, the cannabis industry was at one time an underground industry, which over the years has continued to become more and more mainstream. With this continued acceptance, what does a responsible path to legalization look like, and how do we as individuals encourage that? What role do higher educational institutions play in this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I've spent a lot of time talking with people about as I developed this program and started putting it out there. I had a lot of people coming up to me when I was, tabling at different events like NECAN in Atlantic City and the Real Cannabis Entrepreneur Conference. People would come up to me like, what is Rutgers doing here? Why is the university here? What's happening? And especially a law school, right? I think having higher education institutions be part of the conversation and show their support and support communities and people working in the industry can play a huge part in that, as you described, that sort of becoming mainstream and that continued acceptance. If a state institution like Rutgers has a program in this, that's going to play a big part in community attitudes towards the state's cannabis industry, to our alumni's perspectives, to our faculty's perspectives. In terms of the kind of responsible path to legalization, and Jamila already touched on this, figuring out what social equity means and how to actually support people who have been historically disadvantaged by the war on drugs. has to be part of that responsible path to legalization, and not just kind of giving it lip service, but making sure that there's actual concrete support there. And so that filters down, right, into what higher education institutions have to be thinking about. So we have to value the expertise of people who have been working in growing and selling cannabis for decades. We have to make sure that we build opportunities into our curricula to support social equity initiatives. I've started doing that by trying to secure scholarships for our program for the New Jersey's social equity and diversity owned business owners. It's about making sure that higher education institutions really think about that sort of social justice aspect, as well as just how to make money from their programs. This is a conversation that I have with a lot of other higher education institutions, how to balance mission and margin, how to make sure that, yes, I'm making programs that can make the law school some money, but actually do good in the world and support the communities that deserve that support as we think about the broader federal legalization.
Okay, that's great. That's okay. So, the cannabis industry is a rapidly changing landscape with laws, regulations, and technologies constantly changing. How do institutions of higher education adapt and evolve in response to ongoing research, changing legislation, and emerging consumption methods, ensuring that it remains accurate, up to date, and relevant for the public?
Yeah. So, as I said a couple minutes ago, higher education does not move quickly. It is not an agile field. It takes years to get a degree program approved and set up and launched, and then like making any changes to the curriculum can be really hard. So, in my role in general, I'm really interested in thinking about ways that we can create programs that can be more responsive to rapidly changing industries, not just the cannabis industry, but like look at technology as a whole and the rise of AI, and that has the potential to transform all of the education that we offer. So for me, it's thinking about ways that we can create programs that can be adapted really easily. The 6-month certificate program, our first cohort ended in July. Our next one launches in October. I'm already making changes to the instructors and the curriculum to make sure that we are up to date with what's changed in New Jersey this year. So it's thinking about alternative formats for education. It's thinking about who we're hiring to teach our classes and how open they are to refreshing their content, and how much they are experts in the field and have their fingers on the pulse. And I think the other piece of it is making sure that all of the education programs that we offer take advantage of, well, take advantage, that sounds a little shady, but really highlight, right, the range of experiences and expertise that our students bring as well. I think in the first cohort in our certificate program, yes, students learn from our instructors and guest speakers, but also the conversations that students were having among themselves, being like, this is what happened to me this week at a municipal meeting. This is what email I got yesterday about my license application. Finding space to really value everyone's perspectives and encourage peer-to-peer learning, I think, is key to making sure that we stay relevant and have that up-to-the-minute information for folks.
Okay, that's amazing. Well, thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah. Okay, so last but not least, we have Rashida. Alrighty, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So the questions I have for you are, how can we better foster the intersection between cannabis and higher education? And how do we continue to involve more Black and Brown people in the cannabis space?
Well, that is a great question, and I think it's the most relevant question. I know in higher education right now, we have this intersection of the legalities of it. Like, can we actually have programs that are accredited? And as Vanessa just mentioned, no, we have to work around that. But what is that disadvantage? Like, when is that going to change? Because we're in an industry that is not going anywhere. It's actually just growing. And it doesn't make sense to not educate a workforce in this day and age to be prepared for such a big billion-dollar industry. So for me, when I go from universities, and in my historical background working with HBCUs, it's important that I get this messaging across about, really, for the war on drugs, it was our community, Black and Brown people, who were impacted, but we're still being left out. And now we're left out of the education aspect of it as well. I think it's just time to have some common sense conversations with our legislators and policymakers to make it easier for us to obtain the education enough to participate in this industry.
Alrighty. And the next question I have is, what are some of the opportunities you see from the intersection of business and education as it relates to the cannabis industry? How do you see these partnerships growing in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think the question is, education is a business. Let's get that straight. We make money for educating people. And so having an open platform where we can actually have education be accredited is important. But I think also when we start to intersect with HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, I think it's important that they actually have additional resources, because it was their family, their community that was impacted by the war on drugs. So if I were to make such claiming statement, I think every HBCU should be awarded a license to be able to cultivate, manufacture, and research cannabis, and that they should be, their education platform should be credited. I mean, some type of reparations need to be made for women like myself, and women who were impacted by the war on drugs. And I say women because when the Black male was incarcerated, we were actually the ones left to raise a family, a single parent family household, and to bear the burdens of this policy. So I really think that we need to think about it in terms of how can we make this community whole again.
All right. And my last question is, how can cannabis education adapt and evolve in response to ongoing research, changing legislation, and emerging consumption methods, ensuring that it remains accurate, up to date, and relevant for the public?
I think right now, in the cannabis industry, it's really important is to understand that everything is just constantly changing, and it's really hard for us to be able to accurately say what we're going to do in the future and based our policies on now. So when I think about just the regulatory framework, I think about it as a point as a Black woman, because, of Latino descent. If you change a policy and I'm in business, that means it comes with some type of fiscal responsibility. I'm going to have to pay more money to do whatever you want to do to operate my business. And that is a burden on me that I don't have access to. So right now, even safe banking, I can't get a commercial loan. I have to go to private equity. Now, in the nation, there's less than 3% of women that are funded, period. Then you put Black on top of it, of Latino descent, in the private equity space, and I'm not getting a dime. And because of the federal legal nature of banking, I can't get a commercial loan. So for me, that means I can't get resources to run my business, and then I'm out of business. So these are the things that we need to bring to the forefront in terms of educating about cannabis entrepreneurship as it relates to business, period, but also education. Because if someone spends, thousands of dollars on receiving a certificate or even a degree in this space and are not able to financially support themselves with it, it just goes back to the same point that these programs aren't working. We need the government to step in and help us empower this new generation of students that want to be educated, that want to participate, and also entrepreneurs that want to have a chance of having a thriving business.
Thank you, everyone, for coming and answering our questions.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you. This conversation was awesome.
It was.